Hello and welcome. I guess we're streaming just a few minutes early. Just going to take a break for just a minute, be right back, so hang in there. All right, we are live. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is Brother T checking in with you, and we are going to stream another episode of A Course in Miracles gathering. It's episode number 15, and we have some folks in our audience tonight. We're going to be talking about the JCIM version, which is a Course in Miracles Society version. A Course in Miracles, I call it the Black Pearl version, but I guess it's a black book with white pearls on it. But the point is that this is the original scription that was what was transcribed through Helen Schachtman. It's the Foundation for Inner Peace version, which was the blue book that I kind of grew up on, so to speak, in my Course in Miracles journey. That book had, some say, a little bit less than 25% of especially in the first 5 chapters, there was quite a bit that had been taken out. And so we kind of focus here on this version because I believe that all of the information that was given through Jesus to Helen Schachtman was relevant. And so I just want to be sure that we don't leave anything out. And some of my mentors, in fact, my primary mentor in A Course in Miracles, hello, thanks for joining us tonight. My primary mentor in A Course in Miracles was intent on using this version of the teaching, which is the JCIM version or the CIMS edition. You can go to jcim.net, I believe is what it is, and you can read the book online if you don't have a copy in your possession. But anyway, that's kind of where that's at. I wanted to kind of get into just a little bit of a discussion tonight. I want to talk about a circumpunct. Have you ever heard of a circumpunct? Have you ever heard of that before, Donald?
Sounds like an illegal operation.
It sounds like an illegal operation. Okay, well, no, we won't say that it's this illegal operation. The circumpump is really a dot in the middle of a circle. Okay? But this kind of represents, this image kind of represents our experience, if you will. If you would imagine that the center here, the dot itself, is not a very good arrow. The dot itself, let's just say that that is the body-mind. The body-mind. Now there's a bit of a misperception. There's a lot of misperceptions about our mind. You know, we tend to have been educated to believe that our mind is, and our thoughts are contained within our brain, but they're not, okay? You are an idea in the mind of God, if you'll allow me to say it that way. And that is not contained within the brain. In fact, thoughts are not contained within the brain, or at least I'll say your real thoughts, if you will. But if we could look at that center of our circumpunct and say, okay, that is the body and the thoughts of the body. So if we think about an animal, you know, I tend to think about my cat at home, or, you know, one of my dogs that I've had in the past. And if that animal was threatened, if it was out in the wild and it was threatened, water?
Mike,
Huh?
has you got a mic?
Oh no, but you can speak up. They can hear you. Okay. I'll just get close because there's nobody else here, so they can hear you. So the point is that this animal has the ability to know that its physical survival can be threatened. Yes. And so when an animal is threatened by a predator or whatever the case may be, by a human, then it will have an experience of fear about its physical existence, and it will act in a way to preserve its physical existence. Can we agree on that? But an animal, if you will, doesn't have a thinking mind, not like the thinking mind that we would say that we have. And so I'm going to say that thinking mind, which is over and above the animal mind, if you will, is called, we can call that the ego mind. Another way of looking at it is as the small self mind, the small self mind. So we could say this is the self, and this is a self that is a thinking self, or a thinking mind. So the brain is really like a receiver, and it's receiving all of these signals, all of this information from the body, the five senses. So the eyes, right, the visual, the hearing, the audio, the olfactory, the taste, the skin, the sensitivity, the touch, if you will. And so we can sense temperature, and we seem to be able to sense a linear experience of time and space. But that thinking mind, if you will, is the thoughts of the ego self, but that's kind of like a made-up self. And you have experiences of that, and the best way I can relate to that in my own mind, if you will, my own thought process, is to think of the sleeping self. So at night, I'll have a sleeping self. And so I almost look like at the sleeping self as just a part of this mind, if you will, of the ego self. And it's just living out its dramas, it's living out its fears, whatever, and it creates a world out of nothing, really out of imagination, if you will. And all night long it's going from drama to drama, but it's not really conscious or aware of the bigger part of you, which we'll call this body-mind self. In fact, it's not even conscious that you're safe at home in bed. It just believes it's continuing to live out an existence as a thinking self, okay? All of that, if you will, all of this self, we could say, is the center of our circumpunct. Okay, it's the very center of that. I'm going to grab my handy-dandy eraser over here. But you're much more than that physical self. So we have our circumpunct, right, which represents the center dot. Then we're saying it represents you as a body mind, as a physical self. And that physical self also has a sleeping self, if you will, a mind that can be a fragment of it or a partition of it that's unconscious of its bigger existence. And much like the sleeping self is unconscious of this self, this ego mind self, this thinking mind, the body self, the body mind self, the small self, small L self, is unaware of the bigger part of you. And if we could actually circumscribe you as mind, we would say that everything that's outside of you as a body mind, as an ego self, this would be your higher self. And you can see that this is a very small drawing, if you will. This would be more like just a dot here as your existence as a body mind. I've just made it a little bigger so that we can see it tonight in our discussion. But the point is, this is the true self. This is the bigger self. This is the self that the body mind self is literally completely unaware of. Okay? And when we allow ourselves, when we allow this ego mind to slow down the thinking process, when the mind begins to open up in peak experiences, we can be informed, if you will, we can be informed by the higher self, we can actually begin to experience thoughts that this thinking self would literally begin to realize and say, those are not my thoughts. We could call that your intuitive self. And we all know that we have an intuitive self, right? We could say it's an innate self. And like the animals have an innate self, if you will, that knows, that they need to sleep at night or they go hunting at night or whatever their species is programmed to do through the innate. But the innate self also, we could say, is informing the mind of this small body mind self. But we have to make effort to open up to that self, to open up to that mind. But when we do, we can begin to hear and experience thoughts that can come in apparently not through the ears, but through the very center of our being. And that's literally what it was going on when Helen Schachtman was channeling, and we call it channeling. And it's not about being possessed or anything like that. And I know there's a lot of people that have been conditioned to be fearful of being possessed, that even meditation in and of itself could be dangerous, etc., etc. None of that could be further from the truth, okay? Because you cannot truly be possessed, okay? Because you are in control. You have total free will. You have total control of the mind, this self, what it accepts and doesn't accept. Now that's not to say that you can't accept a lower energy, that you could have a lower influence of consciousness inform you energetically and maybe even in a pattern of thoughts that you would identify as feeling like, something that could be frightening or scary. But that's your choice to choose what you're willing to listen to. In other words, all power under heaven and earth is yours. You get to choose what you ignore, and you get to choose what you give your attention to. That's always been the case. That's always been the case. So when the mind begins to join, okay, when there's a meld in mind, not physically through the ears, but through the mind itself. We could say the pineal gland is actually the way that this information kind of comes into our mind. And again, our mind now then becomes a sixth sense of being able to receive as a receiver, like a transmitter or a receiver, a radio receiver, if you will, something like that as in a metaphor. But your mind can begin to hear thoughts that are outside of your own small self-thinking, okay? And ultimately, that is the goal. Believe it or not, the goal is to meld, if you will, to begin to merge with the voice of love. Your higher self, your true self. And of course, in Miracles, he says the Holy Spirit. But he also says that the Holy Spirit is nothing more than your right mind. And I like to say capital R, capital M mind, your right mind, your true self. So in order to really know love, in order to really know ourself, we have to kind of ignore and begin to set aside the thinking self mind, Now, the animal world, if you will, do not have that aspect of themselves. They don't plan their future. They live in the present moment, right? They're guided by their intuitive self, right? The voices or the thoughts, if you will, of the instinctual self, the innate self that informs their activities through their day and through their evening and through their life. But we also have access to that, and we would tend to ignore it because we cover it over with the thinking self-mind, okay? So you're beginning to see that there's many different levels to who and what you are, right? And so we go from a self, of a sleeping self, and I'll put that little sleeping self down here. So we've got the sleeping self here, and then we've got the thinking self, and we have the true self. And the true self, the self of love, what we could say is the higher self, or in the Course in Miracles, the Holy Spirit, nothing more than your right mind, is available for you to be informed by that mind, by those thoughts. But as you become tuning in, as you begin to tune in to the thoughts of love, to the thoughts of your higher self, and begin to be informed by those thoughts, you do in fact recognize, that those thoughts are not your thoughts. In other words, that you really begin to realize that you're creating a dialogue. You're beginning to discover an access point where you're letting in this vibration at first, this intuitive self, this little voice, and what does it sound like? It sounds like your voice? Of course it sounds like your voice. It is you. It's nothing more than your right mind. And so the voice can and has been all along informing you and having dialogue with you when you'll slow down enough, if you will, the thinking self so that you can begin to hear that self. And when that begins, our mind begins to really open up. And this takes place as we evolve consciously. So we've kind of mapped out levels of consciousness, and I've talked about it a little bit, and I won't get into it too much tonight, but most of the world, I'm going to say 78% of us are operating at this lower level called victim consciousness. And that's really where we're just listening to the thoughts of the mind of fear. It's really the ego self, the thinking self, but its thoughts are all based in fear and or guilt. And really those two are very difficult to separate, if you will. If you're having a thought of guilt, there's fear associated with it. If you're having a thought of fear, there's guilt associated with it. The next level, as we begin to evolve consciously, in other words, we begin to wake up and begin to tune in, we begin to look outside of ourselves into the mind, go to the heart space, if you will, through meditation, through prayer. Prayer is very, very powerful, and really in prayer, that's what you're doing. You're beginning to have dialogue with something that you might heretofore say, okay, that is something outside of myself, God outside of me, an angel outside of me, my guides outside of me, whatever you might refer to it as. But what I want to encourage you tonight to recognize that it is you. You're right up in the middle of it, if you will. It's really inside you. It's by going to the center of your being that you get in touch with your higher self, your true self, your right mind, the Holy Spirit. And this is the voice of love, the voice of truth. And ultimately, as you begin to meld with that voice, as you begin to allow it in and let it guide you, you do this more and more and more, eventually it becomes who you are. As Jesus said, when you see me, you see the Father. That's really literally what he was referring to, as I understand it. Okay, so the next level then is called, I call it M&M, but it's manifestor manipulator. But this is about 21% of us here in the world, and we're operating in these first two levels of consciousness. So this is 90, if you add that together, 90, 98, 99% of all the people in the world are operating here in these two levels. And this is primarily, these first two levels is primarily the level of fear, okay? It's the level of fear. And there's not a tremendous amount of joy. There's mostly guilt, that we could go through all the attributes of that. But the point is, this is really the realm of the small self, the small thinking mind, okay? Operating out of fear and guilt, thoughts of fear, thoughts of guilt, thoughts of shame, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of anger, thoughts of depression, thoughts of anxiety, thoughts of apathy, thoughts of, you see where we're going? It keeps going, right? And so those are aspects of that mind, okay? But once we cross over to the next level, the next two levels, if you will, I'm going to call this the channel level. This channel level here is when we start to look now. We're going outside of ourselves. We're starting to look outside in our mind. And really what we're doing is looking within. And it feels like when in my discussion that I'm saying you have to look outside the mind of the thinking self, really what I'm pointing to is to not look outside, is to look within, right? And to begin to ignore, which is the only thing that this mind cannot defend itself against, is you ignoring it. You, right? Which is consciousness, awareness itself. That's what you are. You have and are always giving your attention either to this world outside of you through this thinking self, or you're beginning to go within. Okay, so in my little drawing here, it looks like I'm looking outside, but I'm saying that it's beyond the scope of the small self mind. The small self mind cannot comprehend outside of the boundary it's established with its thinking self. It believes itself to be, guess what? Separate. A separate thinking self. It has private thoughts, and it cannot really even, it can't in its wildest dreams begin to comprehend or imagine what this inner self within you, the higher self, is really like. And as you begin to experience it, this self doesn't experience it. It's almost like a curtain. It's because your mind is split. Split in two, literally. Your mind is literally split. You came into an experience of separation, and you literally walled yourself off, and the body is the physical expression of that as a self of separation, okay? Which in and of itself is actually impossible. That's why we say it's illusion. The interesting thing is, what I want to talk about tonight is that a lot of people are really saying that the mind, if you will, is contained within the body or contained within the brain. The thinking self is contained within the brain. We also believe that we tend to be told and conditioned to believe, that God is out there somewhere. But what I'm trying to help you see tonight is God is within, okay, within you. So I'm not going to use my outbound arrows so much as I'm just going to say that self is trying to and continuously working to get your attention, if you will, so that you will begin to look within, which is where you would be connecting with that self. That's where you'd be connecting with that self. So that's when we begin to channel. Now, when we ultimately begin to be in denial or completely emerge, if you will, and we no longer are giving any validation to the insanity of this small self-thinking mind, then we begin to operate in the world at the highest level, which I'm going to call the mystic level. And the mystic level is where our brother Jesus and many other people have achieved that level of consciousness. But you see, what we've done is we've kind of stepped through these four primary levels of consciousness that I love to teach about. Because here we begin to see that this self here, if you will, begins to disappear as our experience. We begin to just be, as Jesus said, when you see me, you see the higher self. I'm speaking as the Holy Spirit. Yes, sir.
And I may be using different terms, but I think the higher self seems to have information about healing that the ego does not have.
Oh, good question, or good point. So the ego, so what you're saying is that the higher self knows about healing in a way in physical form. You're talking about physical healing?
Well, yeah, I guess I would say that would be
okay.
Both
So when
physical and mental healing. It has aspects of omniscience, if you will, in the old-fashioned terms. But,
okay, sure.
That it has information of things that you need to do possibly to heal yourself, either in mind or body.
Okay. So if we would accept that, let's accept that this self is actually the knowing self. Okay? But let's talk a little bit about what this self might know. Now remember, this self over here is just making shit up. It's just imagining what this self is like, because this self believes itself right here in the middle of our circumpunct. It believes itself to be separate, and it's walled off. In other words, your thoughts right now, you can't. If I'm having a thought, I'm just having a thought. You can't hear it, right? You're separate. You're over there. I'm over here. You're over there. I'm over here. Whatever. You can't. I can't hear your thoughts. You can't hear my thoughts. And the point is that we are this separate self, right here. That's what this is. Believes itself to be separate. So it can only imagine what this true self is. It can only imagine and make up concepts about what truly knowing is. So another word that I would use would be, it never really knows certainty. It's not certain of anything. If we took a poll of everyone that's watching this and tuning in, and we could all just type in, have you ever felt absolutely, completely, 100% certain? Can you absolutely be completely 100% certain of anything right now? Right?
Well, a lot of times I'm get so high in anxiety that I, if you will, I almost need a second opinion of something somewhere.
Right, because of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, where's that at? Doubt.
Yeah.
It's at the lowest level of consciousness.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I'm not careful, I could be victimized because I'm uncertain about what my future is or what somebody else's intentions are. I can make up all kinds of scary stories, right? But I'm just creating a picture of a future that doesn't even really exist, right? It doesn't really exist. I'm just kind of making it all up.
Well, I got a talent for imagining all the bad things that could happen to me.
Yes, and we all do. We absolutely all do. We all imagine all kinds of things that can happen to us. But the point I want to make is that this self can only imagine what knowing is. Come on in, man. You want to join us?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So this self can only imagine what knowing is, right? But this self knows. So is there any thinking involved in knowing? What would you say?
Well, it would be almost remembering as much as just.
But that's not, see, there's thinking and then there's thought, right? I can have a thought of something, which is really just an image of something. But I can think about something and give it a definition, give it meaning, give it a storyline, give it all kinds of, put thoughts on top of it and then create a process of a stream of thinking, right? So it's very, what I want to say, it's very subtle, right? We're trying to split hairs here a little bit. But what I want to point to is that this self can't really know what knowing is. Remember, it's completely walled off from it, right? So, and where we are is this, and the center of this right here is this self, right? And it believes itself to be all alone and separate, and it believes that this higher self, the Holy Spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, is outside of itself. But what I'm sharing with us tonight, that it's actually, it is within you, and actually you're within it, if you want to call it that. But it is oneness. It is, you are one with all that is. So there's no possibility of separation. And when we get rid of the idea, or we release the idea of separation, we can begin to see that the body even of itself. And when I have a dream tonight, I'll dream that I have a body, but that body will actually be within me, won't it? It'll be within my mind. If I want to say that my thoughts are in my mind, I'm dreaming, but I'm safe at home in bed. But I'm dreaming I'm somewhere else. I'm dreaming I'm having an experience, a physical experience. But I can say to myself, I can see how those are just images that I've created and a storyline that I've created. My small self is created. My thinking self is created. And it's just playing itself out as an experience. But it's an illusion. We can agree on that, right? That dreams and those experiences are illusions, because when we wake up, if we did something bad, we don't go turn ourselves into the police. And if somebody did something bad to us, we might be angry at them for a little while, but we'll eventually come to our senses and realize that it was just a dream. They didn't really do anything. They really weren't even there. They were at home sleeping in, safely in their bed, whatever the case may be. So the point is, this self cannot imagine what knowing is because it's separated from knowing. And I know this is kind of abstract, okay, but it's separated itself from knowing. So when we turn to the higher self, when we turn within and get in dialogue, get in access, get in touch with our higher self, we have the experience of knowing. We begin to know certainty. This voice begins to inform us in a way that we can see that it's unmistakable, that it's truth, even though we can't explain it to anybody else. It's unmistakable that it's certainty. There is no doubt, there is no fear, there's no separation, that we are one with it, it's one with us, and there's a knowing that is just a knowing. It is what is. And there's no thinking to be done. There's no thinking required, right? So I want to go back to your question, because the question that we're trying to get our head around is, so does this knowing self know what would be necessary for this body to be healed, right? Something that this self doesn't know as a body, because the body is aging, the body is getting older, the body is suffering with disease. We could point to food, we could point to lifestyle, we can point to lots of things, but we all know people that lived almost this picture-perfect lifestyle and they passed away. And then we know somebody else that just abused the hell out of themselves, and they're living a lot longer than somebody that took good care of themselves. So we all, this self, because it's in doubt of everything, literally, and fearful of everything, it tries to connect dots of stories and connect those dots so it can say, okay, well now if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, if I do these 4 steps, I'm much more safe. I'm much more likely to be healthy. I'm much more likely to live longer, et cetera, et cetera. But guess what? Everybody's dying. Everybody's dying. We're all said that there's only 2 things that are certain, taxes and death. But what if death isn't certain, right? We've got stories that go back that we've all been exposed to where people lived for 900 years. Was that just a typo? Were they just making that up? Or have we forgotten something about ourselves along the way? And so I'm going to say the latter, okay, to your point, that there is a knowing, that if we have that knowing, that we do in fact live longer. Our body can literally live 900 years. We've got stories about it. So let's accept it, right? So the only thing we really need to focus on is what do we need to know so that our body can, in fact, heal itself. When Jesus was here 2,000 years ago, we were told stories of instantaneous healing. Was that just made up? Or do we believe that to be true? Do we believe it to be possible? The interesting thing about thoughts, this thinking self, and all of its thoughts is that thoughts are things. So whatever you believe is what you're going to tend to experience, right? Life comes at you, it expresses itself to you based on how you believe and what you believe. What you believe is possible, what you believe is, impossible, what you believe is fearful, what you believe is true, what you believe is not true. Your life is taking shape to show you your belief system and show you your consciousness.
Well, just for an example.
Yes.
This has happened to me several times. I'm getting up there in years, and I can't count my age on my fingers anymore. But a lot of people come to me and they say, your body's wearing out. Mm-hmm. Or, whatever implications you want to come from that.
Right.
But like, for example, they're saying my knees are wearing out because I'm getting old. Okay,
so are you 870-something years old, or?
Well, I'm just saying that's their
That's
mindset.
their interpretation.
That's not my mindset.
Okay, it's not your mindset. That's their.
I'm on the other side. I'm on the left-hand side of this chart over here.
Okay, all right. And so I'm with you. So let's then say that if we could get in touch with a higher consciousness by going through the levels of consciousness, this is through conscious evolution. How do we do that? Well, that's what A Course in Miracles is about. It's teaching you how to evolve consciously. We go from duality here at the bottom to oneness at the top, right? So we go from duality, semi-duality, semi-non-duality, if you will, then non-duality and ultimately oneness, pure non-duality. So if we can evolve our consciousness, right, our body is like the gauge on our car, right? So if I get a signal on my car, the little light comes on, and it's that little red engine light. We've all seen that, right? So I'm going to say, okay, just take out a piece of electric tape and stick that over that little red light on your, and you've got it's fixed. Problem solved, right? Yes or no?
No.
No, why? It's not, we can't see it. The alarm's not there anymore, right? But we didn't really address the cause of the alarm. We were addressing the effect, right? So when your body tells you, you get an ache or a pain, knees, shoulders, heart, whatever, fatigue, brain fog, whatever you want, right? You go get a little piece of black tape and you put it, it's a warning light. But what do we do? We go get a piece of black tape and we put it right over top of it, and it's called prescription drugs. Oops, did I say that out loud? And now we don't have the symptom anymore. So we took care of it, right? It's the same thing as putting black tape over that warning light on your dash on your car. Your body is speaking to you all the time. 300 trillion cells constantly communicating to you. Constantly communicating, right? So you and your body are one, literally, and we say the body is separate. We kind of see ourselves even as separate from the body, but we're really not. It is a manifestation of our individuation. It's an expression of who and what we are, right? So who is the master? Is the body the master, doing what it's going to do, or are you the master? Do you speak to your body? Do you tell your body, I'm no longer willing to accept to be sick, so I want you to start doing what you need to do to heal? Have you ever had that conversation with your body? Yeah? Most people don't. They have a conversation with their doctor and he writes a prescription. And we put that electric tape over the alarm, and now we don't feel the symptom anymore. The alarm is, and then 5 years or 10 years later, sometimes much quicker than that, we've got a whole host of other problems, because all drugs, I hate to say this out loud, kids, but all drugs have side effects. There's none that don't, right? Food has a side effect. Everything you put in your body has a side effect. Some of those side effects are good. Some of those side effects are bad, right? But the point I'm trying to get to is, if we don't listen, if we don't tune in to the innate self, the intuitive self, the higher self, it will constantly tell us what we need to do to help our body to give us the very best service that it's capable of giving us, which is about 900 years. Oh no, this is the blasphemy issue episode. I forgot to say this was going to be the blasphemy episode tonight, because we're going to say that you can live to be 900 years. I know you're out there going, bullshit, I'm not going to live to be 900. Okay, whatever you say, whatever you believe is what you're going to experience, right? That's the way it works. I'm sorry, but that's the way it works. And I'm so glad that that's the way it works, right? Because we get to choose the thoughts that we hold, the energy we hold, the vibration we hold, right? Because we're either holding thoughts of fear or we're holding thoughts of love. And the difference between those two things is perfect health or sickness. So what would I like to know so that my body would operate at maximum? So I would be operating in a maximal status physically. But the interesting thing about this, guys, is that when you start to move towards the mystic level, you don't really even care about the body anymore, because you know that it's about how much are you concerned about that chair over there? Have you even given it any thought tonight? It's just sitting right over there. Have you been concerned about it? No, because you don't see, it's not you. You're saying, that's not me. I don't care. There's another one back there. That's not me either. I'm here. I'm in this form. No, you're not. This form is inside you. This is that form in my circumpuncture, and this is who you really are, your true self. So all I really need to do to be informed about how my body can heal itself and the things that I can do to help my body is to stay focused on keeping the main thing. It's to be in touch with my higher self, to move towards evolving consciously. What are the steps that I can do, right? That should be the only question we're concerning ourselves with. What do I need to do to evolve consciously? Because guess what happens when you evolve consciously? More health, more joy, more love, more peace, longer life, physically, and you get to choose, right? What we're being told by Spirit is that we are evolving in form to the point that eventually, not this generation, maybe 2 or 3 more generations before it becomes more and more prevalent, but that we are approaching a time when we won't experience war anymore on our planet. We're approaching a time when we will accept everybody for who they are without judging them. Because we begin to grasp that idea that by judging other people, all we're really doing is judging ourselves and making ourselves sick. Right? And guess what? If we judge ourselves, we make ourselves sick. If we judge anybody else, we're actually projecting judgment on them that we don't like about ourselves. And we're saying, oh, no, it's not on me. It's not me. It's over there. But that's just a mind trick. That's just crazy thinking, stinking thinking. It's all made up. That's illusion. If we would allow ourselves to be in touch with our higher self, the self of knowing, you might say, you know what? I know it's only 8 o'clock, but maybe, maybe I should get an extra hour or 2 of sleep tonight. And I'm going to ask that self. I'm going to create dialogue. I'm going to say, should I go ahead and get some sleep tonight? And that self always has your best interest in mind, right? It is in your mind. It is your mind. It is who you are. So start talking. Oh, I'm not supposed to be talking to yourself. Yes, you are. This is the blasphemy episode. So yes, talk to yourself a lot. Tell your body that you want your body to begin to replicate your cells perfectly. See, every time a cell replicates, 300 trillion cells, and every time one of them replicates, a decision is made. In that moment, right then and there, a decision is made. Copy what is or not. And what the body does is it just keeps copying what is. So if there's damage in a cell, it's duplicated. But if you set the intention and tell your body, no, I want you, the body, every cell in your body is communicating to you through your intentions. And you simply tell your body, I want you to begin to replicate every cell in its original perfect form. You've heard stories about people that actually begin to slow down the aging process, begin to reverse the aging process. That's exactly what that is. They have begun to communicate with their body, and it's not a request. It's your body. So it does what you ask it to do. It's been doing what you've been asking it to do all along, to be fearful. You've been asking it to communicate back to you the feelings that you have, the thoughts that you have, guilt, shame, apathy, anxiety, depression, pride. All kinds of feelings, right? And our body, if you have a thought, your body, it goes through every 300 trillion cells. They all get it. Have you ever seen a flock of birds or a flock of fish and it looks like they all turn at the same time? You have a thought, 300 trillion cells, right? All that DNA, it all aligns exactly together, instantaneously. So, thoughts are things. Pay attention to your thoughts. If you have a thought of harm for someone else, if you're holding judgment against someone else, it's really only affecting you. They may not even be conscious of the thoughts that you're having for them, especially if they're not around you very much. Yes, their thoughts, the thoughts you have about somebody else are having an impact on them. I'm just saying they may not be conscious of it. They might not be conscious of it. But whatever thought you're holding for somebody else, if it's a low energy consciousness thought, it's having a bigger impact on you than it is on them. Because you are conscious of it. You're very conscious of it. You are giving it life. You're giving it expression. Thoughts are things, right? So that's why a word I put in here is forgiveness is so important. Forgiveness is going back before we gave judgment. In other words, beginning to see the perfect innocence of everyone and everything. We're beginning to walk through the world quite loosely. And you've heard it expressed as being in the world but not of the world. So the mystic, one who's evolved consciously to the point of being a mystic, you might call that person enlightened. You might call that person a master. And in the past, it was very difficult and an arduous journey for people, any one of us, to achieve that level of consciousness. But that's not the case now. It's not the case now. Since 1987, the harmonic conversion that happened in 1987, everything is speeding up. And the ability for us to have those experiences, there's never, again, a need now for you to have an intermediary, somebody outside of you, to connect you with your higher self. It's available to you all the time, every instant, 24/7, for every day for the rest of your life. You no longer need somebody else to connect you with God outside you, because the truth is, God is within you. And you don't need an intermediary for that. Nobody can get in there between you and the God within you. And it's in every cell, 300 trillion cells. The God is within you, is within each of those cells. And communicates and connects with you when you communicate and connect with God, if you will. So that's kind of where our conversation is going. If we want healing, we need to begin to expect healing. We begin to need to accept that it's available to us, that we're more powerful than we've given ourselves the ability to be, and that we are one with God, and all is perfect in God, and the body is an expression of that perfection. It's been covered over by false concepts and false ideas of who and what we are, right? So the split self, the split mind, if you will, is just illusory. But that doesn't mean that as we evolve that we can't then become the evolved self in form. And we can be love in this physical plane in relationship with anyone and everyone that we come into contact with. And we can help them by them observing our joy, our health, our expression of love. They can begin to realize that it's possible for them. So you don't have to go out and evangelize or any of that stuff, right? You just have to be happy, guess what? With yourself. You have to be in love with yourself. You have to fall in love with yourself all over again, right? Because that's what you've forgotten. You've forgotten how much you love yourself, right? Not too complicated, right? So let's see, how much time do we have? Okay, so we're about halfway through. This is lesson 26, and it's on page 31 in the workbook. But it kind of speaks to what our conversation is tonight. My attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. Let's think about that. My attack thoughts. You ever had an attack thought? Right? Pretty sure we all have. If we feel threatened, the body defends itself, right? We talked earlier about the animal body. The thinking body of the animal itself has a built-in mechanism for its own survival. And so it will, we call it fight or flight, right? But when we have thoughts that are of the thinking self, the ego mind, that's the next step up, if you will, from the animal self, the animal mind. And that's the self that is making stuff up about our brothers and sisters, about other people, about our boss, about our wife, our husband, our spouse, our children, our parents, our president, other countries. This is where war comes from, right? Now, I've already said that you can live in form, that the body's designed to live at least 900 years. But what I'm I could go even beyond that and say, well, the body would live as long as you want it to live. Because when you are the perfect expression of who and what you are, there is no possibility of sickness in the body. There's no possibility of aging. Interesting. But 900 years is a good step, right? We'll start with a couple hundred, whatever. We could go to 150 next, in this lifetime and be considered to be pretty successful in our effort, right? Right. So my attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. So what is my invulnerability? The body is telling us, the animal self, the body self is saying that it can be destroyed, okay? But that's just a made-up self in the middle of what you truly are. What you truly are is spirit. So you cannot be destroyed. You truly are invulnerable, right? And that invulnerability begins to be expressed in form, right? Because you become evolved in form through raising your consciousness. That's what this book is about. Walking us through these levels of consciousness. So my body begins to reflect my true invulnerability, because in God as spirit, I can never experience death. I can never experience anything that's vulnerable, because I am perfect. Truly, you are perfect, neither behind the point of perfection nor advancing toward it. And in A Course in Miracles, he will say, your strength lies in your defenselessness, right? Because as soon as you try to defend yourself, you're saying, I'm vulnerable. You're saying that I'm subject to sickness, I'm subject to pain, I'm subject to fear, I'm subject to hatred, I'm subject to separation, I'm subject to being bodied, that this is who and what I am, and it's not. So this is getting in touch with the mind of knowing that knows what you are, no thinking required. It's just a state of what is, right? So my attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. It's surely obvious that if you can be attacked, you are not invulnerable. You see attack as a real threat. That's because you believe that you can really attack someone else. If you believe you can attack someone else, then that really says that you can be attacked, yes? But what if they're not a body any more than you are, and you're really not attacking them because they're not in the body? They're not a body. They are this perfect child of God. They are mind. They are spirit. They are truth. They are eternal. They're invulnerable. But if you believe you can hurt somebody else by attacking their body, you are deluded, and you're making a commitment, and you're teaching yourself that you are also subject to attack. And what would have effects through you must also then have effects on you. It is the law that would ultimately save you, but you are misusing it now. You must therefore learn how it can be used for your own best interest rather than against them. Because your attack thoughts will be projected, you will fear attack. And as I said earlier, whenever you're judging somebody, if you move back before you gave judgment, you see their innocence. And anytime after you've given judgment, you're projecting something onto somebody else that you don't like about yourself. In A Course in Miracles, Jesus says you're never angry for the reason that you think you are. And to add a little punch to that, there's never an excuse for anger. Not some of the time, or maybe in certain cases, but there is never an excuse for anger. There is never a reason for anger. Because the knowing self, which is what you truly are, knows that you're not a body, and it knows that you're not vulnerable, and it knows that everybody else is perfect in their expression, so how could you be angry at perfection? Go figure, right? Because your attack thoughts will be projected, you will fear attack. And if you fear attack, you must believe that you're not invulnerable. Attack thoughts, therefore, make you vulnerable in your own mind, which is where the attack thoughts are. So, attack thoughts and invulnerability cannot be accepted together. They contradict each other. So the idea for today, in our lesson today, and this is lesson 26 again, my attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. This idea introduces the thought that you always attack, guess what? Yourself. You're only ever attacking yourself. If attack thoughts must entail the belief that you're vulnerable, their effect is to weaken you in, guess what? Your own eyes. You're only weakening yourself. Thus, they have attacked your perception of yourself, and because you believe in them, you can no longer believe in yourself. A false image, and I'm going to say you no longer believe in this self as being who and what you really are. And because you believe in them, you can no longer believe in yourself. A false image of yourself has come to take the place of what you are. A false image of yourself, the body-mind, has come to take the place of what you really are. The mind is split, and it's like when we go to sleep at night, we're completely unconscious that we're safe and home in bed, and the bigger part of us, the part of us that has a life, that knew what it was going to do today, the jobs, the people, a pretty good perception of what its day was going to be like and what its life is going to be like, is completely lost. People that have passed away are showing up, and you can't even remember that they passed away. When you're dreaming at night, you're literally just a little bitty part of your mind is playing out all these dramas, and it still sees itself as separate in a physical body. But all that is just made up. And what he's saying and what we're saying here is that we take it to the next level. We believe that we are physical bodies, and that is not the truth. The physical body is a representation of who and what you are. You are this perfect individuation of love, an idea in the mind of God. And you are being expressed wherever you are in the world of form. You are recognizable as a thought in reality in the mind of God. You're very recognizable. And so we created the body. Yeah, that's right. You created the body. Practice with today's idea will help you to understand that invulnerability is the result of your own thoughts. Nothing except your thoughts can attack you. Nothing except your thoughts can make you think that you are vulnerable. And nothing except your thoughts can prove to you this is not so. My attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. So you could fill in the blanks here, and you could say, I'm afraid of blank, something will happen, and you can just add whatever you want to it. So if you're doing these properly, you should have some 5 or 6 distressing possibilities available for each situation that you use, and quite possibly more. It's much more helpful to cover a few situations thoroughly than to touch on a larger number. Go over every possible outcome which has occurred to you in the connection that has caused you concern, referring to each one quite specifically, saying, I am afraid of whatever this is, right? And after you've named each one of them, you can say this to yourself. That thought is an attack upon myself. Conclude each practice period by repeating today's idea once more. Well, we've covered a lot, and we're going to call it short tonight, but it's actually been a pretty good session. This is our circumpunct. I hope I've shared some thoughts with you that will help you to see who you really are and what you really are in God. So with that, let's close with a prayer. Join with me if you will. I am forever an effect of God. Father, I was created in your mind, a holy thought that never left its home. I am forever your effect, and you forever and forever are my cause. As you created me, I have remained. Where you established me, I still abide, and all of your attributes abide in me, because it is your will to have a son, so like his cause, that cause and its effects are indistinguishable. Let me know that I'm effect of God, and so I have the power to create like you. And as it is in heaven, so on earth. Your plan I follow here, and at the end I know that you will gather your effects into the tranquil heaven of your love, where earth will disappear and separate thoughts unite in glory as the child of God. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Love and blessings. We'll see you soon.